let's go through the layout and panels of the Deliver page. The Render Settings panel is where most work and thinking is done in terms of the Deliver page. The rest of the Deliver page is fairly straightforward, but this is the panel that can offer the most complexity and challenge to its users. There we do most of our work by choosing and customizing the format, the codec, and other settings for the rendering of our export. Render settings are divided into 3 tabs: Video, Audio, and File. We can also choose additional outputs from the 3-dot menu instead of the default single output if we want to export the same content using multiple formats and codecs, or version with data burn-in and version without data burn-in, which means that you have timecode burnt into the video image. These versions can be set to be created into their own subfolders. Just to note that I'm using a Windows PC with NVIDIA GPU and AMD CPU. The hardware on your computer alters the list of available formats and codecs in Resolve. Most notably, the ProRes exports are not available in the Windows and Linux versions of Resolve. They are exclusively on Apple devices. The Expand Shrink button gives more room to either the Render Settings panel or to the Timeline panel. This is quite handy as there are quite a lot of settings to check in the Render Settings panel. Once we have figured out the format and the settings for our export, we can click the Add to Render Queue button. The viewer shows the final state of the timeline, and when rendering, the viewer shows you exactly how the media being output will look using the current settings. The Render Preview function can be turned off, which might be helpful if you are using a less capable CPU and GPU for rendering. The preview has the default set at minimal, which I think is the best setting, as it's good to have a preview which doesn't take a lot of resources from the actual rendering. Press P to see the viewer in full screen. Press P again to exit the full screen view. From the top of the viewer, from the drop-down menu, you can change timelines within the same project without having to go to the edit page to switch timelines. In the thumbnail timeline, which you open or hide by clicking the Clips button, has each clip displayed as a single thumbnail, like in the color page. The timeline is for checking the status of the clips only as they can no longer be modified in the Deliver page. The thumbnails and the clips sorting enable you to see at a glance the state of grade, codec, noise reduction, file name, and flags of each clip. If some clips have been mistakenly ignored and might still need some refining. This is where the benefits of flagging clips with similar attributes with same colored flags become realized. The thumbnails also make it easy to select individual clips or ranges of clips that you may have missed to work on or you need to render. The clip drop-down allows you to filter the timeline clips according to different parameters and limit the range of media you wish to output in different ways. For instance, if you've already rendered a timeline but have since made modifications, you can use the Show Modified Clips option to display only the clips that have been altered within a specific time frame. Alternatively, you can select the Show Unrendered Clips option to display all clips that have yet to be rendered. You can also create custom smart filters for clips using various parameters and metadata. The Timelines function in the Deliver page is to give a more detailed view on the clips in your timeline, with the assumption that everything is ready for export, as the clips in the Deliver page timeline are no longer modifiable. By default, the entire timeline is chosen for the export, but you can mark with in and out to render only the selected parts of the active timeline. There's also a box in the top middle of the timeline panel, from which you can choose the rendering area to be either the entire sequence or an in and out selection. One negative in using the menu is the fact that when you choose the entire sequence option and return back to the in and out selection, the in and out markers have been removed from the timeline. Hopefully this will be fixed in some future update. The render queue is a list of all the jobs you've queued up for rendering. Each job can have its own selection from the timeline with custom render settings. You can set up multiple jobs in the queue, and when you go on a break, you can click the Start Render and the jobs will be rendered while you're away. Many editors leave the edit to render the queue during night. Keep in mind that if you have selected a job in the render queue, the Start Render button will render only the activated job. When you have no job selected in the render queue, the Start Render button will render all the jobs in the queue. From the render queue, you can click its three-dot menu and choose Show All Projects, which will show all the jobs from all projects which you or your user has queued up in Resolve. If you have multiple jobs queued, you can click the Show Job Details to see more info on the settings of the render jobs in the queue. After the render job has finished, it will remain in the queue. You can right-click a job and choose Open File Location to check your finished product. To remove the job from the queue, click the three-dot menu and choose Clear Rendered. You can expand and diminish the render queue panel from the arrow button on the top right corner. Using tape would have its own panel in the deliver page, but I'm gonna skip the tape workflow as I live under the impression that there are so few people who have the need for it. Most tape archives have already been digitized into file form, thankfully.